Rapper Sean Diddy Combs.
Sean Diddy Combs.
Sean Diddy Combs.
Sean Diddy Combs.
Sean Diddy Combs
was raided by
Homeland Security agents.
Has been arrested.
Sex trafficking investigation.
Was just sentenced to more than 4 years in prison.
He was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs.
You're saying that there's tapes and they're being shopped?
Yes.
So like a catch and kill?
Catch and kill, correct.
Wow.
In 2024, Sean Diddy Combs was no longer navigating vague gossip or disposable tabloid chatter. Years of quiet speculation hardened into something far more serious. Formal complaints, mounting legal scrutiny, and consequences that carried real financial weight. Once that shift happened, the narrative moved faster than any damage control strategy could keep up with. That turning point explains everything that followed. Old footage suddenly resurfaced. Asset movements drew attention. Private conversations about who knew what and when began leaking into public view. None of it makes sense unless you understand that the legal footing beneath him had fundamentally changed. The earliest and most immediate pressure came through finances. Long before verdicts or court outcomes, major litigation drains money at a staggering rate. Elite attorneys, private investigators, expert consultants, round-the-clock security, and crisis response teams don't come cheap. And that's only the beginning. Every new filing creates fresh costs. But there's another risk that often flies under the radar. When authorities suspect certain assets may be connected to alleged wrongdoing, asset seizure becomes a real possibility. At that point, money isn't just about paying lawyers. It becomes a strategic battlefield. That's why high-profile figures often begin quietly restructuring their phase, listing properties, transferring ownership, cutting visible expenses, all while publicly insisting everything is business as usual. Then came the fixation on video clips. Once a case enters a legal arena, the internet starts treating every old recording like hard evidence. Context disappears. Edits circulate. Fake clips mix with real ones. Some footage is authentic but misleading. Others are outright false, and some are real yet legally irrelevant. Still, virality takes over, and speculation fills the gaps left by facts. That confusion didn't happen randomly. It surged after a specific moment in March 2024, when federal agents arrived at Combs properties in Los Angeles and Miami. From that point on, the story stopped being theoretical. The situation became real, visible, and impossible to dismiss.
Hundreds of undercover officers in their vehicles and Bearcats. We got a tip and we're kind of standing by for a while.
More people coming out. Who's this guy? Yeah, they're all kind of dressed alike.
Definitely shocking and hectic out here in Holmby Hills at one of Sean Diddy Combs' homes. We were first on scene as it all unfolded. We came right in the middle of the convoy of about 40 undercover law enforcement vehicles before they even put up the crime scene tape. The Department of Homeland Security making a big bust, officers say, in connection to a sex trafficking investigation. And while it was all happening, investigators were also raiding his home in Miami.
March 25th, 2024 marked the moment the story stopped circulating as rumor and started unfolding like a federal investigation. On that Monday, agents connected to Homeland Security executed coordinated search warrants at properties linked to Sean Diddy Combs on both the East and West Coasts. In Los Angeles, the operation played out in an area built for isolation and discretion, high walls, gated entrances, and long private drives. But discretion ends when federal warrants are involved. Helicopters hovered overhead. News crews captured agents methodically combing through the property. What viewers saw didn't resemble celebrity coverage. It looked like law enforcement business. At the same time, another team arrived at Combs' Miami residence on Star Island. Different location, same signal. The timing was synchronized, the approach organized, and the visibility clearly anticipated. Report described a strong law enforcement presence as agents moved inside while the surrounding area was secured. Online, the images spread fast, framed like a movie scene. For anyone familiar with major investigations, there was nothing theatrical about it. It was textbook procedure. One detail, however, quickly took on a life of its own. Combs' sons were seen outside the Los Angeles property during the search. According to law enforcement sources, this is standard protocol during warrant executions. Individuals on site are temporarily detained, identified, and released if no further action is warranted. Still, In moments like this, routine procedures get misread as explosive developments. Every frame becomes a headline. What actually matters is the purpose of searches like these. Federal agents don't enter high-profile homes for spectacle. They are there to collect items that can be documented, cataloged, and used later. Phones, computers, hard drives, financial records, travel documents, anything that helps trace connections, communications, money flow, and behavioral patterns. Reports indicated additional materials were seized, but the core takeaway is straightforward. Investigators were assembling a comprehensive record. And once that process begins, the question is no longer whether the situation will expand, but how fast it will move forward. After a day like March 25th, the path typically leads to a courtroom, and sometimes beyond that.
Cassie Ventura, the star witness, the ex-girlfriend of Combs, who was with him for about 10 years, released a statement before this sentencing was handed down saying, "I am so scared that if he walks free, his first actions will be swift retribution towards me and others who spoke about him at this trial."
Sean Combs will appear in court with his lawyers. There are no cameras in federal court. He will be advised of the charges against him, and he will almost certainly enter a not guilty plea. But the key thing to watch for is then we'll have the question of bail. Will prosecutors agree to let him out on bail? Will prosecutors ask the judge to lock him up pending trial? That could end up in a contentious argument. So
after the raids, the process didn't jump straight to spectacle. It moved the way federal cases usually do, through filings, sealed proceedings, and quiet pressure building behind the scenes. For months, the work happened on paper and in closed rooms until it finally surfaced. In September 2024, prosecutors in Manhattan made their move. Federal charges were unsealed against Sean Diddy Combs, alleging that he had operated a long-running criminal operation fueled by influence, wealth, and coercion. According to the government, that power was used to orchestrate sexual encounters and then ensure silence afterward. The scope of the indictment was expansive: racketeering, sex trafficking accusations, forced labor claims. It wasn't a narrow case aimed at a single incident. It was structured to surround the defendant from multiple legal angles at once. Combs was taken into custody in New York and officially entered the federal detention system. From that moment, the first major legal battle wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about freedom. Defense attorneys pushed for his release while the case progressed. Prosecutors pushed back hard. Judges weighed the usual factors: risk of flight, potential witness interference, and the gravity of the charges themselves. This time, the government prevailed. Combs was ordered held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. As months passed, filings stacked up and pretrial arguments dragged on. That period mattered more than it looked like from the outside. Celebrity power depends on constant movement, private calls, travel, impromptu meetings, rapid decisions, access to money. Incarceration strips that away. Every conversation is limited and monitored. Every choice must pass through attorneys. Even simple requests can stall or be rejected entirely. Life outside continued, but the person at the center of the storm was reduced to responding through a tightly controlled system. By mid-2025, the case finally reached a jury. The outcome didn't align with the most extreme predictions circulating online, but it wasn't a clean break either. Combs was found guilty on 2 counts related to transporting individuals for prostitution, while being cleared of the most severe charges prosecutors had pursued earlier in October 2025. The sentence followed, just over 4 years in federal prison, along with a significant financial penalty. Shortly afterward, he was transferred from Brooklyn to FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey, a low-security federal facility, to serve out the remainder of his term. Once that move became public, the online reaction followed a familiar pattern. Incarceration became a signal flare. Old clips resurfaced. Alleged leaks spread. Context vanished. Suddenly, recycled footage was being labeled as revelation and proof. That's when the conversation shifted again, away from courtrooms and into the obsession with what people began calling the tapes.
I'm going to take your souls. We have the power. We decide what's hot. If we don't go, nobody goes. If we don't support, nobody supports. We control what's cool, We control what's hot. We control what your kids listen to, what they dance to. We control what's in video games. We control how they wear their pants, sag their pants. We control everything.
Once the sentence was official, the internet reacted instantly, as if a signal had been fired. Suddenly, everything became a tape. Old party videos resurfaced and were reposted as if they were newly uncovered evidence. Short audio clips spread with captions that stretched far beyond what the recordings actually showed. Even neutral moments, a red carpet exchange, a joke during a live appearance, a quiet backstage prayer, were reinterpreted as hidden admissions. That's the danger of viral content. Courtrooms rely on verification, timelines, and clear chains of custody. Online culture runs on interpretation and emotion. And when a once untouchable figure appears weakened, speculation quickly gets elevated to certainty. In comment sections, mood replaces proof. Some of the material circulating was described as authentic footage from the mid-2000s. Videos allegedly tied to major weekends, award show after-parties, Super Bowl events, started making the rounds again. Reports surrounding these clips painted a specific picture, an early phase filled with high-profile guests, followed by a later shift once cameras and celebrity faces disappeared. The suggestion wasn't merely that the parties became more extreme, but that certain moments might resemble conduct investigators had already been examining. That gap between resemblance and evidence is significant, but it explains why those videos resurface as if they were fresh discoveries. Then came the rumors about private sales. Stories spread that certain recordings were being quietly offered behind closed doors, a practice often referred to as catch and kill, where footage is allegedly sold to those involved to prevent public release. Some of these claims appeared in reporting, others remain unverified. But the reason they traveled so fast was simple. The fear of exposure creates its own economy. Other clips went viral for a different reason entirely. Not because they proved anything, but because they felt uncomfortable when rewatched. A karaoke performance, a speech at a celebrity event that suddenly seemed unsettling, a party video where someone appears unwell while the room laughs it off. None of that amounts to legal guilt, but it does influence perception, and perception is powerful. These moments don't convict anyone, but they help shape what the public thinks it already knows. Once that narrative solidifies, the next phase doesn't come from footage at all. It comes from people, former collaborators, acquaintances, insiders, choosing their words carefully in interviews, hinting that the reality extends beyond a single individual. That's the context behind comments like Aubrey O'Day publicly stating she would not testify at her former mentor Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial. She made it clear this wasn't something to announce casually or discuss freely. According to her, it's not a subject you promote, joke about, or speak on lightly at all.
One thing we can make clear.
But
I don't have to have you here. I'm trying.
Why do you want me here?
I have you here. I have you here because I feel you talented. But don't get it twisted. I'm starting to think about why do I have you here.
I'm not getting
Okay, so you clear on that though. Check this out. You clear on that. You understand now. I'm asking myself why do I have you here. So I'll move on to something else. I'll give you the answer soon. All right? And you may not be here then.
Okay. Before it gets to
and anybody want to go with you, they could go too.
Aubrey O'Day occupies an unusual space in this story. She was close enough to experience life inside Combs' world firsthand, yet far enough removed now to speak from a reflective distance. That combination gives her perspective weight, without putting her at the center of the legal fight. As the case evolved from dramatic raids into formal charges, her voice resurfaced in the same arenas where public opinion was forming: podcasts, clipped interviews, headlines, and reaction-driven commentary. In May 2025, while the trial was still unfolding, O'Day launched a new show alongside journalists Amy Robosh and T.J. Holmes. She didn't frame the moment as vindication. Instead, she described it as an overdue reckoning that had taken years to arrive. Her central message was straightforward. She had spoken about her experiences long before the case ever became mainstream news. The difference wasn't that the story had changed. It was that people were finally paying attention. Not because the harm was recent, but because the spotlight had shifted. O'Day also drew a line the internet often ignores. She made clear that she was not planning to testify and emphasized that not every person with relevant experiences is meant to take the stand in a federal prosecution. At the same time, she confirmed that Homeland Security had contacted her and that she had met with investigators. That detail mattered. It suggested authorities were gathering broader context, patterns, corroboration and background, not just relying on the most visible names. When the verdict came down in July 2025, guilty on 2 counts related to transporting individuals for prostitution, acquitted on the most serious charges, her reaction went viral for an unexpected reason. There was no celebration. She appeared physically shaken. Her focus turned immediately to those who had testified, particularly Cassie Ventura. The message beneath her emotion was clear and cutting. A court can follow the law and still leave survivors feeling that the full truth never made it into the final judgment. A legal outcome doesn't automatically reflect the totality of harm. That's where O'Day's perspective stretches beyond a single defendant or trial. She's pointing to the disconnect between how the public interprets verdicts and how victims often experience the aftermath. Legal wins and losses don't guarantee closure. They don't always deliver accountability. And they rarely dismantle an industry culture that rewards silence and endurance over exposure. Once you accept that gap exists, the stories shift again. Because if the legal system captures only part of what happened, the unanswered question becomes, what happens to everything else? In high-profile collapses, the earliest signs of unraveling don't always appear in court filings. Sometimes they show up in billing disputes. In early January 2026, reports began circulating that people tied to Combs' daily operations, staff, contractors, support workers, were claiming they hadn't been paid while he remained in federal custody. The details spread quickly because it felt small but symbolic. When money stops moving predictably, everyone connected to a powerful figure starts planning an exit. Combs' representatives responded swiftly, insisting that attorneys and personnel were being paid, that no one was abandoning ship, and that he still retained control over his finances. On the surface, it sounded like a firm denial. But situations like this are rarely that clean. The real tension often lies in timing, authorization, and who has the power to approve expenses. That's where another name entered the narrative: TriStar Sports and Entertainment. The business management firm widely reported to be overseeing his financial affairs during incarceration. Coverage of TriStar didn't describe a passive accounting role. It portrayed the firm as a checkpoint. Payments weren't simply issued. They were submitted, reviewed, and approved. Sometimes quickly, sometimes not. For people waiting on those funds, delays feel personal even when they're procedural. Rent doesn't pause. Bills don't wait. If you've worked inside a celebrity operation, you're also used to speed, private jets, last-minute decisions, instant solutions. A controlled approval process can feel like a door slowly closing. Reports even suggested that family members were required to request funds through the same system, replacing a world of immediate access with formal permission. Whether every detail was accurate or not, perception alone carried weight. It painted a picture of influence shrinking, not just in courtrooms, but in daily reality. That's how these stories gain momentum. First come the raids, then detention, then a verdict. After that, the ecosystem surrounding the defendant begins to destabilize until the public has something tangible to watch. Which is why the next phase wasn't really about finances at all. It was about resurfaced footage, specific dates, and the growing claim that certain nights in 2004 and 2005 weren't just chaotic parties, but documentation.
I am the fucking hardest hustler in the world. This is Savage Part 2. Don't tell me about shit. It's 2022 and I'm still a savage. Whatever I want, I get. Whatever I want, I fucking get.
What dragged the narrative back into the mid-2000s wasn't nostalgia. It was specificity. Certain media outlets and online accounts began anchoring old footage to precise dates, locations, and recognizable details, transforming vague party clips into claims like, "This happened here, on this exact night." Reports focus on videos allegedly recorded in 2004 and 2005, linked to major cultural moments, award show after-parties, Super Bowl weekends, and other high-profile events. The allegation wasn't simply that these gatherings were excessive. It was that the atmosphere shifted dramatically once the celebrity crowd thinned out. According to those accounts, there was a public-facing phase early in the night, polished and familiar, followed by a private phase that looked nothing like the red carpet image people remember. Some descriptions claim the footage showed individuals partially undressed, behavior that appeared chemically influenced, and situations that, if genuine, would raise serious questions about consent and power dynamics. Another reported effort involved trying to verify when the videos were shot by comparing clothing, interiors, and settings with publicly photographed appearances from the same weekends. But even if a clip is authentic, authenticity alone doesn't equal proof. A video can show what a room looked like. It can't automatically establish coercion, trafficking, or who agreed to what, when, and under what circumstances. That's why investigators treat material like this with caution and fixation. They focus on context, who recorded it, how it was stored, whether it was altered, and what additional evidence exists that could change its meaning. Without that framework, footage is just imagery. What made these reports feel volatile wasn't embarrassment. It was implication. The suggestion wasn't that the clips were merely damaging, but that they were sensitive enough for someone to want them controlled, concealed, or monetized.
Can't reveal the person who is on.
No,
the
I can't explain who the person was, but
High profile?
Mr. Combs was in the tape, and this other person is, I would venture to say, more high profile than Mr. Combs.
Really?
I also was just recently contacted by someone who wanted me to essentially represent them in the sale of one of the Diddy tapes, which I declined that because...
Wait a minute. Say that again. Say that again. Back up. You're saying that there's tapes and they're being shopped?
Yes, there already have been tapes leaking around Hollywood, being shopped around to individuals in Hollywood, but one particular person contacted me to shop a particular video they were in possession of and to contact the person who was in the video to see if they were interested in purchasing the video before it became a public knowledge.
I've heard this before, so like a catch and kill.
Catch and kill, correct.
Wow.
Once a belief set in that old recordings were out there, the next theory followed almost on cue, that some of those recordings weren't simply surfacing on their own. They were being quietly sold. That's when the phrase catch and kill began circulating. Traditionally, the term refers to tabloid tactics. Purchase a story, lock it away, and make sure it never reaches the public. But in this version of the narrative, the meaning shifted into something more ominous. The rumor suggested that individuals were being contacted directly, told to buy the footage now or risk seeing it released later. One attorney tied to a civil lawsuit even went on record describing an approach about a video that allegedly featured Combs alongside another recognizable name. The most striking part of that account wasn't merely the claim that a recording existed. It was the tone. It was described as transactional, almost like a sales pitch carrying an unspoken warning. If that version of events were true, it would imply a shadow economy running parallel to the public scandal. Information turned into currency, silence priced and negotiated. It's a narrative the internet latched onto quickly, partly because it feeds a familiar myth that every powerful celebrity is guarding a vault of secrets, and once it cracks, panic spreads. But there's another reason it gains traction. The logic feels plausible. If certain material can destroy reputations, people will pay to keep it buried. And if there's money to be made, someone will try to exploit it. From a legal standpoint, however, the situation is far murkier. A video offered for sale isn't automatically credible, and a clip released online isn't automatically real. It could be altered, staged, mislabeled, or taken out of context. The mere existence of a marketplace suggests opportunism, not proof of a specific offense. Even so, the impact is undeniable. The rumor of a leak economy alone is enough to shift behavior. Former associates fall silent. Old posts disappear. Timelines get cleaned. Past appearances are reconsidered. And it conditions the public to see the next viral clip as confirmation. That's exactly what happened when a handful of uncomfortable videos involving other celebrities began trending, not because they established wrongdoing, but because they gave the online conversation new faces to plug into an already charged narrative.
While the internet argued over clips, real images started coming from a place Combs couldn't control, Fort Dix. In late 2025, TMZ published the first visuals of him inside federal custody. Not in a courtroom suit, but in prison-issued clothes, moving through daily routines. One set showed him working in a media library area connected to the chapel, handling DVDs and religious materials. Another showed him outside with other inmates, smiling in a way that confused people who expected him to look broken.
Once the conversation about tape spread beyond Combs himself, the story morphed into something else entirely. It stopped being about one person and turned into a digital scavenger hunt. Online sleuths weren't just searching for footage of him anymore. They were dissecting every old video for anyone who happened to be nearby. One of the most circulated examples was a karaoke clip featuring Combs and Meek Mill. In any other timeline, it would have been forgettable, a late-night moment off-key singing, the awkward energy that comes with a phone camera catching something meant to stay private. But in this climate, it became something else. Viewers slowed it down, replayed it, froze frames, and assigned meaning to facial expressions and body language that could easily mean nothing at all. That clip didn't resurface randomly. It appeared alongside renewed attention on a civil lawsuit filed by producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones, which made allegations involving Combs and others in his circle. Within that filing was a reference to a Philadelphia rapper described vaguely enough that many online users convinced themselves it pointed to Meek Mill. That was all it took. Not confirmation, just implication. The lawsuit's wording acted like fuel, allowing speculation to outrun facts. And this is where the story enters its most distorted phase. Online culture doesn't separate a claim and a legal complaint from a proven fact, or a verified report from a caption written for engagement. Everything collapses into one blurry category. It exists, so it must matter. Once that happens, nothing is off limits. Music lyrics get reread like coded admissions. Old friendships are reframed as secret alliances. Silence becomes suspicious. Responding becomes suspicious too. If someone stays quiet, they are hiding. If they speak up, they are nervous. There's no winning condition. The speculation around Meek Mill shows how a narrative can grow without actually gaining substance. It spreads sideways, absorbing names, moments, and unrelated clips until the story is no longer about evidence. It's about what the audience thinks it can interpret. Then the tone shifted again. Not because of another party clip or lawsuit excerpt, but because new images emerged from somewhere Combs had no control over: federal custody. While the internet debated old footage, real visuals began coming out of Fort Dix. In late 2025, TMZ published the first images of Combs inside the facility. He wasn't in a tailored suit or behind a courtroom podium. He was in prison-issued clothing, moving through routine daily life. Some photos showed him working in a media library connected to the chapel, handling DVDs and religious materials. Others captured him outdoors with fellow inmates, smiling, an image that unsettled people who expected to see someone visibly defeated. It didn't match the narrative many had constructed. Beyond the prison walls, signs of contraction continued. Records showed that his matte black Gulfstream G550, a 2015 jet registered under Love Air LLC, was sold in October 2025. The U.S. tail number vanished, replaced with a San Marino registration. That kind of change doesn't signal luxury anymore. It signals liquidity. Then January 1st, 2026 arrived, bringing a legal reset in California. AB 250 opened a 2-year revival window for certain adult sexual assault claims that were previously time-barred, running through December 31st, 2027. Laws like that don't just pose risk to one individual. They extend pressure outward to enablers, bystanders, institutions, and anyone who may have helped maintain silence. That's why this story isn't losing momentum. It's expanding. The focus keeps widening, pulling in systems, relationships, and unanswered questions. If you follow this entire arc, the real question now isn't just what's viral, but what's missing. Is the internet turning fragments into conclusions? Or are we only seeing a fraction of what investigators and courts already have on record? Let me know how you're reading this moment. And if you know someone else tracking this case, pass it along. The next chapter doesn't narrow. It keeps reaching outward into the same cycle that pulls power, rumor, investigation, and exposure into collision.